Welcome the spicy lady. Some people do not compete for attention. They change the rules of attention. There are certain personalities that do not fit neatly into the way most social or professional environments are built. In many spaces, people learn early how things work. Speak in a certain way to be accepted. Show effort in a visible way to be noticed. Build connections to move forward. Over time, these patterns become almost automatic. They create a system where approval, access, and recognition quietly shape behavior. But there is another type of presence that does not follow this rhythm in the usual way. She does not move through situations just to be seen or approved. She observes first. She understands what is happening beneath the surface. Who is influencing the direction of a conversation? What is being valued in a room? And where unspoken expectations are guiding behavior. But instead of adjusting herself to match all of it, she chooses selectively what to engage with and what to ignore. This creates a different kind of response from people around her. Not because she is trying to stand out, but because she is not reacting in the expected way. In environments where most people rely on approval or position to feel secure, her independence feels unfamiliar. It is not about being loud or silent. It is about not being easily shaped by external pressure. That is what makes her presence difficult to fully understand in systems built on predictability. Stay with this until the end, because once you understand this mindset, you start to see power, influence, and control in a completely different way than before. Let's dive deeper. The spicy lady. Number one, that they don't trade autonomy for access. Elite circles often run on silent exchanges. Status for compliance. Sigma females don't play that game, which makes them difficult to buy in many high-level spaces. There is an unspoken deal. You get closer to opportunity, influence, or powerful people, but in return, you adjust yourself. You soften certain opinions. You agree more than you actually feel. You show loyalty in ways that are expected, even when it costs you something. Nobody writes this down, but almost everyone understands it. This is where a different kind of woman stands out. She might be offered a seat at the table, a connection that could change her life, or a chance to move faster than others. But before she says yes, she quietly asks herself one question. What will this cost me in the long run? Not money, not time, but control over her own choices. And if the price is too high, she walks away. That decision confuses people. From the outside, it looks like she is turning down something valuable. Imagine a workplace where a senior executive takes interest in her and offers mentorship. It sounds like a golden opportunity, but over time, she notices small expectations. Agree more. Stay available. Support decisions without questioning them. For many, this feels normal. For her, it feels like a slow loss of self. She steps back. Not loudly, not with a speech. She just stops leaning into it. She does her work, keeps her distance, and builds her path in her own way. And that is where the tension begins. Because she cannot be easily drawn into the usual exchange, she becomes hard to predict. People cannot tell what motivates her. They cannot use the usual mix of reward and pressure to guide her decisions. That is not that she is against success or connection. She simply refuses to earn it by giving up her independence. And that is what makes her different. Stay with this, because once you understand this pattern, you start to see it everywhere. Number two, they break invisible contracts without announcing it. Most people follow unspoken social rules unconsciously. Sigma females see those rules and quietly opt out. Every social space runs on quiet agreements that nobody explains out loud. You laugh at the right jokes. You agree at the right moments. You support certain people even when you have doubts. It keeps things smooth and predictable. Most people follow these patterns without even thinking about it. It feels normal because everyone else is doing the same. But some women notice these patterns almost immediately. They see who gets interrupted and who never does. They notice how opinions change depending on who is speaking. They pick up on the subtle pressure to agree, to fit in, to avoid standing out in the wrong way. And instead of reacting loudly or challenging it head-on, they make a different choice. They simply do not play along. Imagine a team meeting where a popular idea is being praised. Everyone nods, adds support, and builds on it. She listens carefully that if she disagrees, she does not soften it just to keep the mood comfortable. She might ask a direct question that exposes a flaw, or she might choose silence instead of fake agreement. Either way, she steps outside the expected script. That small moment changes things. People feel it. Even if they cannot explain IT, that IT creates a slight tension. Because the usual rhythm has been interrupted. She has not argued or created drama. She has simply refused to follow a rule that everyone else accepted without thinking. Another example is social gatherings. There are expectations about how long you stay, who you engage with, and how you present yourself. She might leave early without making a scene or choose not to entertain conversations that feel forced. Again, no announcement, no explanation, and that is what makes it powerful. Because when someone quietly steps out of these invisible agreements, it reveals that they were never as fixed as people believed. Stay with this, because once you start seeing these hidden rules, you cannot unsee them. Number 3, that they don't signal ambition in predictable ways. They may be ambitious, but not loudly. That makes them hard to categorize, track, or compete against. Most people show ambition in ways everyone understands. They speak up often, highlight their wins, stay visible, and make sure the right people notice them. It is a clear pattern. If you watch closely, you can usually tell who wants to rise, who is competing, and who is positioning themselves for the next step, but some women move differently. They are still driven. They still have goals. The difference is that they do not package that ambition in a way others can easily read. They are not always the first to speak, yet when they do, it carries weight. They are not constantly reminding people of their value, yet their results quietly build a strong case. This creates confusion. People struggle to figure them out. Are they competing or not? Are they aiming for more, or are they just passing through? That uncertainty makes it hard to predict their next move. And when someone they cannot be easily managed. Think about a workplace example point. 2 people are up for a promotion. One is visible, always speaking about their goals, networking, making sure leadership sees their effort. The other does excellent work, but does not chase attention. She improves systems, solves problems others avoid, and builds trust without making noise about IT first. She may be overlooked, but over time, her impact becomes difficult to ignore. By the time people realize how valuable she is already ahead in ways they did not track. Another example is competition. When ambition is loud, others know how to respond. They can compete directly, block moves, or adjust strategy. But when ambition is quiet and self-directed, there is nothing obvious to push against. And that is where her strength lies. She is not trying to fit into a known path. She is creating one that is harder to map, harder to follow, and much harder to stop. Number 4, that they don't need proximity to power to feel powerful. This disrupts hierarchies built on proximity, networking, and gatekeeping. A lot of systems are built on closeness, who you know, who you can reach, who mentions your name when you are not there. Access becomes a kind of currency. The closer you are to the center, the more important you are assumed to be. People adjust their behavior to stay in that circle. They attend the right events, maintain the right relationships, and protect those connections carefully. But some women do not measure themselves that way. They can sit at the same table as influential people and not feel the need to attach their identity to it. And they can also walk away from that same table without feeling like they lost something important. Their sense of direction does not come from being close to power. It comes from knowing what they are building and why. This changes the dynamic in a quiet but powerful way. Imagine a social circle where everyone is trying to stay connected to one key figure. Conversations are shaped around that person. Opportunities flow through that person. Now imagine one woman who engages when it makes sense, but does not orbit around that center. She builds her own connections, focuses on her own work, and does not treat proximity as an achievement. It first. It seems like she is missing out. But over time, something interesting happens. While others are waiting for access, she is creating her own leverage. While others are trying to stay included, she is becoming someone others seek out. Another example is in career growth. Many people believe being close to leadership is the fastest path forward, and sometimes it is, but it can also create dependence. If that connection weakens, so does their position. She avoids that trap by building skills, credibility, and independence that do not rely on a single gatekeeper. That is what makes her different. She does not reject power. She just refuses to borrow it. And once you understand that, you start to see how much of the system depends on people believing proximity is everything. Number 5, they reject urgency culture. Elites often operate on controlled urgency. Sigma females move at their own pace, which resists pressure tactics. In many high-level spaces, speed is not always about efficiency. It is often about control. Decisions are framed as urgent. Messages come late at night. Deadlines appear suddenly. The pressure is subtle but constant. Move fast, respond now, decide quickly. And if you hesitate, it can look like weakness or lack of commitment. Most people adapt to this rhythm without questioning it. They rush replies. They agree before thinking things through. They take on more than they can handle just to stay relevant. Over time, this pace becomes normal even when it drains clarity and good judgment, but some women choose a different approach. They pay attention to the difference between real urgency and manufactured urgency, that if something truly needs immediate action, they handle it. But when the pressure feels artificial, they slow down instead of speeding up. They think. They ask questions. They take the time needed to make a solid decision. This can feel uncomfortable to others. Imagine a situation where a decision is pushed as critical. Everyone is expected to agree quickly so things can move forward. She listens, processes the information, and says she will respond after reviewing it properly. No panic, no rush. Just calm control of her own pace. That moment changes the dynamic because urgency often works as a tool. It reduces the time people have to question things. It pushes them into agreement before they fully understand what they are signing up for. When someone refuses to be rushed, that tool loses its power. Another example is communication. A message comes in late expecting an immediate response. Instead of reacting instantly, she responds when she is ready and clear. Not out of disrespect, but out of intention. She values accuracy over speed, and that is what sets her apart. She understands that pace is power. If someone else controls how fast you move, they influence how you think. By choosing her own timing, she keeps that control. Number 5, they don't attach identity to roles, titles, labels, and positions don't define them, making them harder to contain within systems. Most systems run on labels. Manager, founder, assistant, influencer. Once a label is assigned, expectations follow. People begin to act in ways that match the role they carry. A manager is expected to lead in a certain style. A junior staff member is expected to stay within limits. Over time, the role stops being just a function and starts becoming an identity. But some women never let that happen. They can hold a position without becoming it. They understand what the role requires, but they do not let it define how they think, speak, or move. This makes them harder to predict because they are not acting from a script tied to a title. Take a simple workplace example. Someone gets promoted and suddenly changes. They speak differently, behave more carefully, and protect their position at all costs. Their decisions start revolving around keeping that title, but she does the opposite. She steps into the role, does what is needed, but stays grounded in who she is outside of it. If something feels wrong, she questions it. If the role no longer fits, she is willing to walk away. That freedom creates a different kind of presence. Another example is social identity. Many people introduce themselves through what they do. Their job becomes their main story. But she can sit in a conversation and not lean on any label to define her value. She does not need a title to feel solid in who she is. This unsettles structured environments because systems rely on people staying within their assigned boxes. It makes things easier to manage, easier to predict, easier to control. But when someone refuses to be reduced to a label, those boundaries become weaker. It also changes how others relate to her. You cannot simply appeal to her position or status. You have to engage with her as a person who thinks independently of the role she holds. And that is where her strength lies. She can step into roles and step out of them without losing herself. Number 6, they notice power dynamics others ignore. They see who interrupts, who defers, who controls narratives, and adjust accordingly. Every room has a pattern even when nobody talks about it. Someone speaks and people listen closely. Someone else speaks and gets cut off halfway. One person can make a suggestion and it is accepted immediately while another has to repeat the same idea 3 times before it is taken seriously. Most people sense these things, but they brush past them and focus on their own role. She does not. She watches carefully, not in a suspicious way, but in a focused and aware way. She notices who interrupts and who gets interrupted. She pays attention to who people look at before they agree. She sees who controls the direction of a conversation without speaking the most. This awareness gives her an advantage that is hard to teach. Imagine a meeting where ideas are being discussed. Instead of rushing to speak, she listens first. She notices that one person influences the room more than their title suggests. When she finally speaks, she directs her point in a way that connects with that person's thinking. Suddenly, her idea lands stronger than it would have if she just spoke into the noise. Another example is in everyday conversations. There is always someone who tries to steer the narrative. They frame situations in a way that makes them look right or important. Most people either accept it or push back emotionally. She does something different. She listens to how the story is being shaped and calmly introduces facts or questions that shift the direction without creating conflict. This is not manipulation. It is awareness. Because when you understand how influence actually moves, you do not waste energy fighting the wrong battles. You position yourself in a way that makes sense within the moment. That is what makes her presence stand out. She is not reacting blindly. She is reading the room in real time and adjusting with intention. And once you start seeing these patterns for yourself, conversations begin to feel very different. You stop focusing only on what is being said and start noticing what is really happening underneath it. Number 7, they are internally referenced, not externally calibrated. Decisions come from internal standards, not trends, applause, or pressure. Most people move through life using outside signals as a guide. What is trending? What gets applause? What people around them approve of? It feels safe because you get constant feedback. You know when you are accepted and when you are not. Over time, that feedback starts to shape decisions more than people realize, but some women operate from a different center. Before they decide anything, they check in with their own standards first, not what will impress others, not what will be easiest to explain, but what actually aligns with their values, their goals, and their sense of direction. This does not mean they ignore advice or feedback. It means those things are considered, not followed blindly. This creates a kind of stability that is hard to shake. Imagine someone choosing a career path. One option is popular, respected, and guaranteed to earn approval from family and peers. The other is less understood, maybe even questioned, but it fits who she is and what she wants long term. Many people will choose the first because it comes with immediate validation. She is more likely to choose the second if it feels right to her, even if it takes longer to prove itself. Another example is social pressure. Trends change fast. What people praise today, they criticize tomorrow. Someone who relies on that approval is always adjusting, always trying to keep up. She does not move like that. If something makes sense to her, she sticks with it even when it is not popular. And if something feels wrong, she steps away even if everyone else is doing it. This does not make life easier. In fact, it can feel isolating at times, but it makes her decisions stronger because they are not built on shifting opinions. They are built on something more stable. When challenges come, she does not panic or change direction quickly. She reviews her choices, adjusts if needed, and keeps moving. And that is what makes her different. She is not waiting for the world to tell her who to be. Number 9, they don't escalate. They disengage strategically. They conserve energy instead of trying to win every conflict. Most people are taught, even without realizing it, that every disagreement needs a response. That if someone raises their voice, you raise yours. If someone challenges you, you defend yourself immediately. If tension appears, you fix it right away or prove your point until the other person understands. It feels natural because it looks like control. But some women don't operate that way. They understand something most people miss. Not every conflict deserves energy. Not every argument is worth the cost of attention, emotion, or time. Instead of escalating situations, they quietly step back from them when it makes sense. This is not avoidance. It is selection. Imagine a conversation where someone is trying to provoke a reaction. They push buttons, twist words, or try to pull you into defending yourself. Many people fall into the trap because they feel the need to be understood immediately, but she notices the pattern early. She realizes the goal is not understanding, it is reaction, and once she sees that, she stops feeding it. She might respond calmly once or she might not respond at all. Sometimes she simply changes the subject or ends the conversation without drama. From the outside, it looks like nothing happened. Internally, she has already moved on. Another example is workplace tension. Someone makes a subtle remark that is meant to undermine or provoke competition. Instead of turning it into a bigger issue, she chooses where her energy goes. If it does not affect her goals directly, she lets it pass, not because she is weak, but because she understands that constant reaction drains focus. This creates a different kind of strength. People who escalate everything often end up exhausted emotionally and mentally. They win moments, but lose clarity. She avoids that cycle. She knows that control is not always about response. Sometimes it is about restraint. And over time, this makes her harder to destabilize because when someone is not dependent on reacting, they are not easy to manipulate through pressure or conflict. She does not try to win every situation. She chooses which ones are even worth entering. Number 10. They expose fragility by existing, not by attacking, but by simply not conforming. They highlight how much of power depends on compliance. Not through confrontation, not through argument, not by trying to prove anything, just by being consistent in who they are, even when the environment expects something different. Most systems look strong on the surface. They have structure, hierarchy, and confidence. People speak in certain ways, behave in expected patterns, and follow unwritten rules that keep everything stable. It feels solid because most people agree to keep it that way. But that stability often depends on participation. When someone quietly refuses to fully participate in those expectations, something subtle happens. The structure does not break, but it becomes more visible. You start to notice how much of it relies on agreement rather than true authority. Imagine a group where everyone follows a certain social rhythm. People laugh at the same jokes, agree with the same opinions, and adjust their tone depending on who is present. Then, someone enters the space who does not mirror that rhythm. She is respectful, but not performative, engaged, but not dependent on approval. She does not bend herself to match the mood of the room. Nothing dramatic happens, but the energy shifts slightly because now the usual flow is not automatic anymore. People become more aware of how they are speaking, what they are signaling, and why they are reacting the way they do. The system is still there, but it is no longer invisible. This is where fragility becomes noticeable, not because anything is being attacked, but because compliance is no longer guaranteed. And many structures depend on that quiet agreement to function smoothly. Another example is leadership environments. Some authority only feels strong when everyone responds to it without question. But when someone responds thoughtfully instead of automatically, it reveals that influence is not absolute. It is negotiated in real time through behavior and response. She does not challenge the system directly. She simply does not mirror it blindly. And that is enough to show that much of what looks like power is actually sustained by agreement. In final words, true power is not loud. It is unmovable. When you look closely at everything we have discussed, one idea becomes very clear. The women often described as Sigma are not feared in the dramatic sense people imagine. They are not creating chaos or trying to challenge authority directly. Instead, they represent something far more difficult to deal with. They do not rely on systems in the way most people do. In spaces where influence is built on approval, access, timing, and predictable behavior, they stand out because they do not fully depend on any of it. They can participate, but they are not owned by participation. They can engage, but they are not shaped by engagement, and that changes how everything around them feels. People often misunderstand this as rebellion, but it is not rebellion. It is independence that does not announce itself. It is the quiet refusal to be fully defined by expectations, roles, or reactions. And because of that, they are harder to read, harder to predict, and harder to influence through normal patterns. The real tension is not fear. It is uncertainty. Systems feel comfortable when behavior is predictable. When someone does not fit into that predictability, it forces others to adjust how they think, speak, and respond. That is why their presence stands out so strongly, not because they demand attention, but because they do not rely on the usual structures that give attention meaning. And here is the deeper truth. This is not about gender alone. It is about a way of moving through life that does not depend on external validation to stay steady. Once you understand this, you stop seeing power as something people hold over others. You start seeing it as something that comes from not needing what most people are constantly chasing. Thank you for watching, and God bless you.